I'm fine. Two words that sound complete, but often hide a collapsing world behind them. People use them because truth makes us feel naked. Truth reveals fractures we're terrified others will notice. Carl Jung explained that we present a persona to protect ourselves, a socially acceptable version crafted to appear calm, balanced, and in control. The mask is not a lie in the malicious sense. It is simply a shield built from years of learning that openness can lead to judgment. I'm fine becomes a universal disguise. A disguise that lets us pass through the day without exposing the storms we're trying to contain. It's the quickest escape from questions we're not prepared to answer. It's a way to avoid watching someone's face shift from curiosity to discomfort. Beneath that phrase lies exhaustion. A quiet plea. Please don't ask for more. I might not have the strength to explain. We fear that if we let one truth spill out, every other unspoken feeling will follow. We fear losing control of the narrative we worked so hard to keep together. So we perfect the performance, the practiced smile, the steady voice, the nod that convinces others we're coping, even when coping is a distant memory. We hope that if we keep the mask on long enough, maybe our inner turmoil will fade. Maybe ignoring the wound will convince it to heal. Maybe pretending will somehow transform into reality. But beneath, I'm fine, unresolved emotions continue to pulse. They wait. They watch for the moment we are finally ready to admit that we are not okay. It's not weakness, it's fear. Fear of being judged, misunderstood, or dismissed. Fear that our pain might feel like too much for someone else to carry. So we choose silence over vulnerability, isolation over honesty, a mask over authenticity. And yet, every time we say, I'm fine, a part of us whispers, I wish someone could see past my words and notice the truth I'm fighting to hide. Inside us are entire worlds we never let others see. We carry worries, frustrations, disappointments, and fears that demand attention. But when someone asks, how are you? We compress all of it into a rehearsed response. I'm fine. Carl Jung highlighted the tension between our outer behavior and our inner truth. He explained that the outer self wants acceptance, while the inner self longs for acknowledgement. These two sides wrestle every day. One pushes for honesty, the other pulls toward silence. On the surface, we might appear steady, even strong. But beneath that surface, the emotional weight grows heavier, crowding the mind with thoughts that refuse to stay quiet. The conflict isn't loud. It's subtle. It's the long pauses before answering a simple question. The tightness in the chest when feelings threaten to overflow. The silent negotiation. Do I speak my truth, or do I stay in control? We fear what might happen if we finally open the door to what we truly feel. We fear that our voice might crack. We fear that others might think less of us. We fear that if we show the truth, we'll be changed by the reaction. So we build a wall between what we show and what we feel. A thin barrier protected by polite responses. A barrier that says, I don't want you to worry. I don't want you to see me struggle. I don't want to give my pain more power by speaking it aloud. But the inner world doesn't simply disappear because we ignore it. The unspoken emotions linger like unanswered questions. They pull at our attention. They disrupt our focus. They quietly alter our mood and behavior. Carl Jung emphasized that what remains unconscious will find a way out, through our reactions, through our tone, through the heaviness we cannot hide forever. We might say, I'm fine, but our eyes tell a different story. Our posture, our silence, even our sudden laughter can reveal the truth we refuse to say. the internal conflict becomes exhausting. Pretending requires energy. Hiding requires effort. We spend so long curating the version of ourselves we want the world to see that we forget we are allowed to be human. There is a moment that arrives quietly but inevitably, a moment when we recognize that the divide inside us has grown too wide. The mask and the truth can no longer coexist peacefully. And behind "I'm fine," the real voice keeps whispering, "I'm struggling. Notice me." Ask again. When someone says, "I'm fine," they are often trying to protect the people around them, not from danger, but from discomfort, from the weight of their unspoken battles. Carl Jung pointed out that social adaptation doesn't always come from confidence. Sometimes it comes from fear. The fear that expressing our true emotions might make others feel responsible for them. We worry that if we open up, someone might sigh, look confused, or change the subject. So we silence ourselves before anyone else gets the chance. The mind whispers, "What if my truth is too heavy? What if they see me differently? What if they think I'm weak?" We apologize for our feelings long before anyone hears them. We categorize our emotions as inconvenient, as though they must be trimmed, softened, and packaged neatly before we dare show even a hint of them. Many would rather carry the full load alone than risk the possibility of letting someone down. It becomes easier to say, "I'm fine," than to say, "I don't know how to keep going today." Carl Jung understood that humans crave connection, yet fear being seen as a source of trouble. We long for empathy, yet worry that our vulnerability might create distance instead of closeness. There is a quiet heroism in that hesitation, a belief that protecting others means hiding the truth. But this self-silencing comes with a cost. The more we hold inside, the more isolated we feel within our own experience. We convince ourselves we can handle it. We convince ourselves no one needs to know. We convince ourselves the burden is ours alone to carry. So we water down our pain into two simple words: "I'm fine." Meanwhile, inside, a part of us is longing for someone with patience and care to sit beside us and say, "You don't have to pretend with me." "I'm fine" becomes both a shield and a prison, a way of avoiding the fear of taking up space, a way of keeping others comfortable while we struggle in silence. But that fear does not mean we are unworthy of support. It only shows how deeply we value the people around us and how terrified we are of disappointing them. Deep down, the truth remains. Needing help is not the same as being a burden. And sometimes, the greatest kindness we can offer others is allowing them to show up for us. When someone says, "I'm fine," it isn't only the outside world they're hiding from. Often, they are hiding from themselves. Carl Jung explained that each of us has a part we would rather not confront. Thoughts we push away. Feelings we bury deep because acknowledging them might unravel our composure. It is easier to ignore discomfort than to explore it. It is easier to silence the inner voice than to ask why it's crying out. So we distract ourselves. We keep busy. We insist everything is manageable. Until silence returns. Until the mind is quiet enough for truth to knock again. Avoiding inner truth can feel like self-protection. If I don't say it, then maybe it isn't real. If I don't feel it, then maybe it won't hurt. But the emotions we ignore do not vanish. They gather behind the walls we build, pressing harder with every unanswered moment. Carl Jung believed that the pain we reject gains power. It begins to influence our reactions, our decisions, even our identity, all without our awareness. We tell ourselves we are in control. We tell ourselves the mask is working. but every time we say, "I'm fine," we are placing another lock on a door that desperately wants to open. There is a deep fear behind honesty. What if I discover something about myself that I can't handle? What if I have to change once I know the truth? And change, even healing, can feel terrifying. So we cling to the familiar comfort of pretending. Pretending we don't feel lost. Pretending we don't feel overwhelmed. Pretending we are not hurting. But pretending has a limit. There comes a day when the truth demands to be seen. When silence becomes too loud. When the distance between who we are and who we claim to be is simply too wide to ignore anymore. On that day, "I'm fine" becomes too small for the truth we have been carrying. And the only way forward is to face ourselves with honesty and courage. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to finally breathe again. There comes a point when "I'm fine" stops being a response and becomes a reflex. It leaves our lips before our mind even has time to think. Automatic, effortless, empty. Carl Jung observed that when we disconnect from our true emotions long enough, we begin to lose touch with the very parts of ourselves we're avoiding. We numb the discomfort, hoping the silence inside us will feel lighter than the truth. But numbness is not peace. It is just the absence of honesty. We start to move through life on autopilot. We keep the same routine. We smile at the right moments. We laugh at the right moments. We hold ourselves together because that is what we believe we must do. But beneath the surface, we feel a growing distance, a disconnection from our own inner world, an unsettling sense that something is missing, but we no longer remember how to look for it. We tell ourselves feelings are inconvenient. We tell ourselves we don't have time to break down. We tell ourselves that vulnerability can wait. So we shut the door on discomfort and lock it from the outside. Carl Jung explained that when emotions are pushed into the unconscious, they continue to act on us from the shadows. They show up in irritability we can't explain, in sudden sadness that surprises us, in the fatigue that doesn't go away with rest. We say, "I'm fine," because we're afraid of the flood behind the dam, afraid that allowing ourselves to feel will invite chaos, afraid of what might happen if we remove the mask for even a moment. But numbness demands a price. The more we silence our emotions, the more distant we become from who we really are. We lose clarity. We lose passion. We lose the ability to understand ourselves. And eventually, the very instinct that once protected us begins to shrink us. We feel smaller than our own life, more like an observer than a participant. Numbing might help us survive the moment, but it keeps us from ever truly living. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit that we are not fine. To feel what we have worked so hard to ignore. Because the only way to regain ourself is to finally give our truth a voice. "I'm fine" can be the softest shout for help. It is the voice of someone who hopes their silence is still loud enough to be heard. A quiet wish that someone might pause, look again, and gently say, "You don't seem fine." Talk to Me, Carl Jung recognized that people long for authentic recognition. Not the surface-level kind, the real one. The kind that sees the tension in the jaw, the tiredness in the eyes, the hesitation in the breath before the lie is spoken. There is a fragile hope hidden within those two words. Please notice that I am not okay without forcing me to admit it first. We want to be understood without needing to translate our pain. We want someone to offer comfort without waiting for the formal invitation. We want proof that we matter even when we're too exhausted to explain why we're hurting. But fear blocks us. Fear that honesty will lead to rejection. Fear that vulnerability will make us seem dramatic. Fear that someone might say, "You're overreacting," and our internal world will feel invalidated. So we disguise our pain. We hand others a mask and ask them to believe it. We hope they'll see past it anyway. Carl Jung suggested that genuine healing begins when we stop hiding. Yet opening up feels like standing on a cliff with no guarantee anyone will catch us. So we compromise. We hide the storm, but cling to the faint hope that someone will feel the rain anyway. "I'm fine" becomes a silent test. Will anyone notice the truth I'm too afraid to say? Will anyone stay long enough to see what I'm holding inside? It isn't attention people crave. It is connection. The reassurance that they are not invisible in their struggle. That their pain is valid. That someone cares enough to stay when the mask finally falls. Sometimes the greatest act of love, the deepest form of understanding, is simply recognizing the courage it takes to say, "I'm fine," when everything inside is asking for help. Because beneath those two words is a heart quietly whispering, "I need you. I just don't know how to ask." There comes a moment when the mask becomes too heavy to hold, when "I'm fine" feels like a betrayal of everything we carry inside, when the gap between who we pretend to be and who we are grows too wide to ignore. Carl Jung encouraged the courage to become conscious, to allow ourselves to see what we've hidden and to speak what we've silenced. Authenticity does not appear all at once. It begins with a small, trembling truth. I'm not okay today. Not as a confession of weakness, but as a declaration of humanity. We are allowed to be tired. We are allowed to feel overwhelmed. We are allowed to ask for help without apologizing for the weight we carry. When we finally express what's real, the armor begins to loosen. The pressure in the chest softens. The isolation cracks just enough for light and understanding to seep through. Honesty is uncomfortable, and vulnerability can feel terrifying. But every honest word spoken is a step back toward ourselves. Carl Jung believed that healing begins the moment we stop running from what we feel. The moment we choose truth over performance. The moment we say, "This is who I am right now," and allow it to be enough. It isn't about telling the entire world what hurts. It's about giving ourselves permission to acknowledge our internal reality instead of shutting it down. Little by little, the mask becomes unnecessary. Not because life gets easier, but because we grow stronger in our willingness to face it honestly. And as we reclaim our inner voice, the phrase, "I'm fine," transforms. No longer a wall, no longer a dismissal. It becomes a choice rooted in truth instead of fear. One day we speak our deeper reality without hesitation, and we realize we have finally returned to ourselves. I'm not fine, but I'm here. I'm trying. And that is enough. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is information. It is the invisible ink of human emotion. When someone answers, "I'm fine," too quickly, when their voice is tight, but their smile is practiced, when their eyes avoid the places where truth might be revealed, that silence becomes a signal louder than any cry. Carl Jung understood that the parts of ourselves we refuse to voice never disappear. They linger beneath the surface, speaking through subtle cues, a delayed response, a forced laugh, a stare that lasts a moment too long. We begin to communicate indirectly, hoping that someone might hear what our words are too afraid to say. Silence becomes a shield for a heart that doesn't want to break in public. It becomes a filter for emotions that feel too big to express. It becomes a question spoken without sound. Would you still stay if you knew I'm not okay? People are quiet when they are exhausted. quiet when they feel misunderstood, quiet when life feels overwhelming and vulnerability feels like a risk they cannot afford. Yet within silence lies a spark, the desire to be noticed, the longing to be understood, the hope that someone will care enough to lean in and ask, "No, really? How are you?" Carl Jung proposed that what remains unspoken still influences everything. Our silence colors our tone, shifts our behavior, and whispers through the body language we don't even realize we are showing. So when silence becomes the default language, it isn't proof that a person is okay. It might be evidence that they're at their breaking point. The absence of words is sometimes the loudest evidence of pain, but silence can also be the beginning of truth. It gives space for reflection, time for courage to grow, and room for self-honesty to take root. Silence says, "I'm preparing myself. I'm gathering the strength. I want to speak. I just need to feel safe first." Recognizing that silence is not the conclusion, but the invitation is the first step toward helping someone find their voice again. Because beneath every "I'm fine," beneath every quiet moment and every swallowed truth, there is a heart hoping that someone will finally listen to what it has been trying to say all along. The greatest form of care isn't dramatic. It doesn't require perfect words, heroic timing, or flawless wisdom. It begins with presence. It begins with a willingness to look beneath a polished surface. To truly see someone is to notice the subtle tremor in their voice when they say they're fine. It is paying attention to the sentences they avoid, the hesitation before answering, the weight behind their smile, the tension in the silence that follows. Carl Jung believed that what is hidden does not disappear. It waits. It signals. It speaks through micro-expressions and quiet withdrawal, hoping someone will care enough to hear. To truly see someone means recognizing that strength is often disguise, that those who appear the most composed can be the most tired, that people can be surrounded by others and still feel profoundly alone, because loneliness isn't the absence of people, it is the absence of understanding. Seeing someone is not fixing them. It is not rushing in with advice or forcing confessions. It is offering a space where walls are not needed, where someone can stop performing, where their inner chaos is not judged but acknowledged. It is a simple question asked with genuine intent. How are you, really? And then the hardest part, staying long enough to hear the truth. When we choose to look past "I'm fine," we become mirrors that reflect the person, not the performance. We let them know that their quiet suffering is not invisible. We show them they are worth being known, worth being cared for without condition. To truly see someone is to remind them that they don't have to fight their battles alone. There is a moment that always arrives, quietly and without warning. A moment when the mask slips, when the practiced smile falters, when "I'm fine" no longer fits. Most people won't announce their breaking point. They won't raise their hand and say they're overwhelmed. They won't ask for help until the burden becomes too heavy to hide. Carl Jung reminded us that what we refuse to confront will eventually confront us. The feelings buried under composure do not disappear. They collect. They tighten. They demand to be acknowledged. So when someone says, "I'm fine," pause before accepting it as truth. Look a little deeper. Listen a little closer. Offer presence instead of questions that expect quick, convenient answers. Because "I'm fine" is often code for "I'm tired of being strong. I don't know how to begin explaining. I need someone to care enough to ask twice." If we want a world where people feel safe taking off their masks, we must become the people who make honesty feel welcome.